delicatebeats.com.
Welcome back, YouTube. JT here for delicatebeats.com, and boy do I have something good for you today. So would you like to know how I turn these stock synths and presets from Logic Pro X from this into this?
Dead. 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 Dead.
Let me show you how. Let's go. So what you have to understand about EDM synths is that they are half part sound design and the other half is really post-processing. So effect chains that you'll put on each individual tracks to make each of the characteristics of those sounds pop in your mix. So let's analyze the beat and especially the synth parts, and let's look at the effect chains on each of these sounds. So let's start with the main lead. And I'm going to deconstruct this chain as we go so we understand what each of these little effect plugins do. So here's the sound out of the box. Because this is not a sound design tutorial, I'm not going to show you ways today on how to make the sound better from the synth. All right, so really just post-processing. So on leads, it's always a good idea to use some type of distortion, or in this case, overdrive. And what I'm doing here is boosting the very top end. All right. So you want to play around with the drive and the tone. In this case, you know, I just went and I really wanted that sizzle on the top end. That's why I pulled it all the way up to 20,000 Hertz. Next up is a little EQ where I just remove some of the low frequencies to make room for the kick and bass. And I'm even emphasizing more of this top end. So again, before and after. And honestly, with EDM synths, especially nowadays, you can really go crazy on these effects. I'm going to show you how to back off a bit on these changes using compression, but you know, you can really go very aggressive. All right. So next up, I put some delay just to put a bit more movement on the synth track. Next, I'm adding a limiter because I want, you know, to make the delay pop. So it's bringing the delays a little bit more up front. And then I'm, you know, using sidechain compression. I have a kick on this sidechain track and I'm triggering the kick from this little drop down menu here, and as you can see, there are some peaks in the high mids that are very ear tiring, and we're going to fix that with our multiband compressor. What you want to do here is really move around with the threshold to give more bounce to the track using a high ratio. I've put the makeup gain to 0 because I don't need it louder. I just want it to move around. So this is it for the compressor. By the way, you can just play around with these different settings. You know, I like the vintage ones because they create some distortion and extra harmonics, but you can really just, you know, make the track play and go like, you know, change the settings around like this. All right. And finally, this is really the most important lesson in this tutorial, and it's the use of the multipressor as an OTT. If you're familiar with, you know, expert OTT, or, you know, the OTT setting in Ableton Live, this is basically using a multiband compressor as an EQ with very hard settings, OTT standing for over the top. All right, so as you can see here, most of the ratios, well, in this case they're low, but I'm really pushing the threshold really, really low. And as you'll see, the track is really bouncing hard on all of these frequency bands. So see how it really, really makes the sound, you know, more even and more intense in every frequency band. And because, like I said, you know, the high mids are very harsh, you can really work every band to your advantage, you know. Maybe I added some more low end because I cut some and I wanted the sound to be a bit more warm and have a bit more body, but you get the idea. So moving on to the next sound. And by the way, this is a highly creative process. There are no written rules. I mean, yes, there are in terms of, you know, compressor setting and all that, but I want you to break these rules. I really want you to experiment and create your own sound only with processing. All right, it's the same for sound design, and maybe in future tutorials we're going to look at these elements, but right now I want you to create effect chains that make every single sound intense. All right, because this is the name of the game in EDM, dubstep, you know, future bass and all these good styles. So let's listen to what the sound was like prior to all of my processing. So not really exciting, all right? So the first thing I wanted to do was add a bit of movement using this chorus. Bit reminiscent of the hyper and dimension effect in Serum, which gives it as kind of a stereo image and is really useful when you want to move this type of sound out of the way of your main lead, which is mono, all right, or mostly mono. Then I added a bit of distortion again, this time using the phase distortion, and I played with the cutoff and found something really nice in the very low frequencies for some reason, using high resonance. All right, next up is EQ, where actually I remove most of these low frequencies and ear-tiring mids, and again I want to bring out the sizzle, you know, really the harsh, aggressive high end. And because I've made this sound very thin, I'm going to add body using reverb, and if you see here on the EQ, I'm removing just a little bit of the low end. This is more to create an ambience behind the main lead and create some movement, so it doesn't really matter that it's not so full sounding. Next up, I'm adding, obviously, sidechain compression. Again, as you can see, very, very intense settings, all right? If you want to make it bounce even more, you can play around with the ratio. So as soon as the kick hits, you nearly remove the sound altogether, which is nice. And finally, another version of my own little Logic Pro X OTT. So these are the exact same settings as on the lead, which I liked. All right. Moving on to this little bass drop. Or should I say kind of a growl. Reverb first, then sidechain compression. And then the multipressor again. In this case, it removes more of the low end because there's more. I could even go, you know, remove a bit more of that mud here. But it works in the track, so, you know. And finally, because, you know, at the very end, after the sidechain compression hits, you know, it creates a lot of, you know, high end. So I just come in and tame a bit of that with a limiter. All right, just to even the volume a bit. Good. Let's move on to the bass. What I did here, and it's a common practice in these new dubstep tracks, is to actually use your MIDI information from your main lead and just adjust the track for that bass. So I just literally copied and pasted these clips right here, and I get this bass track when moving all of the notes. I think it was 2 or 3 octaves down. By the way, all of these tracks are named after the Alchemy stock preset, and I'm gonna list those as well in the video description, so you can actually get all of these sounds as is. I really made a statement of using the plugin, or should I say the preset as is, and really just, you know, adjust them with post-processing. So in this case, the bass, so full. All of these presets are from the dubstep genre in the browser. All right, so what I did here, let's listen to the bass without anything. So there's a nice metallic quality to it, but there's no, you know, low end, and there's no, you know, bounce to it. So first things first, I emphasized the very low end and brought this metallic quality out a bit more with a high shelf. All right. Next, a little bit of distortion. Again, I wanted to have, you know, a bit more emphasis on the high end. And right now you might be thinking, well, you just destroyed it, JT. It doesn't really sound good. Well, you know, sometimes with EDM, you have to go over the top and, you know, make these sounds, you know, crush your sounds a bit too much. But then when you equalize everything in its own little place, it comes together very nicely. So distortion, sidechain compression. In this case, I used the platinum digital setting because I wanted something very precise. All right, and as you can see, ultra quick attack and release, not too much of a big threshold ratio, sorry, on this one. Because also when that sidechain compression hits, I don't want to create too many, you know, distortion harmonics in there. Much more interesting with the sidechain compression. And finally, again, just to even out the sound, limiter. All right, let's keep going. Now I've got these huge, mega fat super strings. This time I wanted to change things a bit, so I used the smooth strings preset from the EXS24. And if you go in the synthesizers, you have synth strings, and this is the smooth strings preset. The only thing I changed here is the attack, which I wanted to make as short as possible to have much more impact on the one here. Let's listen to the strings without anything. So lots of body and warmth, but there's no, you know, attack or it sounds very, very stale all by itself. So again, I wanted to give more sheen, I don't know, to the top end, remove some of the low frequencies to make room for our bass, which we just covered, and added some reverb. I always use the you know, the first impulse response that comes with the Space Designer. It's really clean. It's a good plate type sounding, and all I do usually is just, you know, play around with the amount and the EQ. In this case, I wanted these super strings to be really, really clear and bright, so I added even a high shelf on the reverb EQ. So much better with the EQ in the Space Designer. And as you probably know, I added some more sidechain compression because the tail of the reverb takes up a lot of space, and with the sidechain compression it creates a nice little movement on the tail. You know, I could even go a little bit harder on the threshold. Okay, and finally, again, you know, our little OTT trick with the multipressor. Same settings as always. You know, I'm using the bright guitar compressor as a starting point, and then it's really just a matter of, you know, EQing, quote unquote, your sound with you know, playing with the bands, and making sure that your thresholds are very, very low so that you tame the sound as much as possible. And to top it all off, I have this little tiny sound here just to finish off the loops, which sounded like this. And again, same thing. In this case, I really went hard on the ratio. Remove the low frequencies and played around with the mids, because there's a nice little harmonic just cleaning the sound, trying to figure out what frequencies make this sound shine. And finally, so see, actually I didn't have sidechain compression, or at least the trigger wasn't the right track. So, and so that's it really for all of the synth parts. And then what I'm using in this case is a Getter drum pack from splice.com and some crashes that from the same pack, and you get this.
Dead. 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 Dead.
And there you have it, folks. You know, Logic sometimes can be very discouraging when you just use presets out of the box, and you're like, you listen to your EDM production heroes out there and you're like, I can't compete with these guys. Well, this goes to show that with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of experimentation, and really, you know, going very hard on each of these plugins, you can achieve awesome sounding results. So thank you for watching. If you have more questions, use the comments below. If you like the tutorial, give me a little thumbs up, and obviously subscribe to the channel, because I've got so much more coming your way. And on this note, this is JT for delicatebeats.com signing off, and I wish you a very, very good production day. All right, peace out, guys.